At Eastern Bank, we believe that growing business should also grow the community. That's why we work to give all business owners what they need to take their dreams to the next level. Our dedication to small businesses and communities has inspired us to create the Equity Alliance for Business program and become the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running. We're proud to be here for all businesses, big and small. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
Are you looking for ideas to make your life happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? Listen to Happier with Gretchen Rubin, a weekly podcast hosted by two sisters. I'm Gretchen Rubin, the #1 best-selling author of The Happiness Project.
And I'm Elizabeth Kraft, a Hollywood showrunner. Each week we share fresh insights and practical solutions, such as follow the 1-minute rule, choose a one-word theme for the year, or design your summer.
Listen and follow the podcast Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Many of you probably know that my family background is Chinese, and my Chinese heritage is something that brings me pride. But like most first-generation immigrants, my feelings are complicated. No one has done deeper or more thoughtful work on this topic than my guest today, the great author Amy Tan. She's most famous for her debut novel, The Joy Luck Club. She has written many other books about complex Chinese American stories. But now she's out with a nonfiction book that is entirely different. The main characters are not Chinese. They are not even humans. They are birds. Amy is coming out as a bird lover and also an amazing artist. Her new book, The Backyard Bird Chronicles, is all about the birds Amy has observed over the last few years. I'm so honored to be sitting here with Amy in Cambridge to talk about her new book. Amy Tan, welcome to Say More.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So this new book, we learned that you're a Renaissance woman. Not only you can write, but you can draw. I mean, you have these beautiful pencil drawings of birds. I found myself staring into the eyes of the birds in your book. And this book came about after you took a nature journaling class, right?
Yes.
And so what inspired you to take that class?
Well, it was around 2016 during the election campaigns, and there was a lot of racism that was now becoming more overt. And it shocked me to think that it had always been there and just not as demonstrative, and I felt it was also directed more to Asians. And I received some of that, and it started making me feel the world was full of hatred, and I needed to find a place of beauty again. And I would go back to nature, and I would fulfill a promise I made to myself a while ago that I would take up drawing when I was retired. So it was around that time I could just do nature journaling, which is a combination of observing, taking notes, and drawing.
And now, what do you mean you made a promise to yourself when you retired that you would draw?
Well, I'd always loved to draw when I was a kid, and I had received not very much encouragement. If I had said I wanted to be an artist to my parents, they would have said, you want to be homeless, you want to be a bum.
My parents said the same thing to me.
Yes, if I had
you want to be a journalist, you want to be homeless.
Yes, why not just go to the gutter right now? I was supposed to be a doctor and a concert pianist. So, the idea of doing anything creative was not even anything I could consider. But there was also an art teacher when I was 16, and he wrote in my report card that I lacked imagination or drive necessary to a deeper creative level. And so that there put another nail in the notion that I could ever do anything creative or to be an artist. I hadn't even thought about writing by then. But I later on in my 30s and my 40s, I said, when I retire, I'm going to have this attic and I'm going to have paints and turpentine smells and I'm, a bunch of paint all over me, and I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to draw or I'm going to paint.
So when I read your new book, I feel like I'm peering into Amy Tan's private journal and sketchbook, right? You've got musings and it's about you've been writing about the birds hanging out in your backyard in Sausalito, which is in Northern California. And I think through this class, you realize that watching and writing birds is about being curious, right?
It's all about being curious.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
In the beginning, I thought I need to make this look really good, and it didn't come out. The drawings didn't come out that well. But I found that really the whole intent of being a nature journalist is to be curious and to ask questions and wonder and be stunned by what you're seeing and then want to know more. So, the idea of drawing the perfect bird or tree or whatever is really not what nature journaling is about. Even though I have those kinds of drawings in my book, it really is about the sketches of what I'm observing. And in fact, the teacher that I had, John Muir Laws, who's a wonderful artist, educator, naturalist, he said, when you look at a bird, don't just start drawing what you think the bird looks like, because that's probably not how it looks like. Imagine yourself feeling the bird. Feel the life force of the bird. And I took it a step further as a fiction writer, and I imagined I was the bird. So I was the bird that I was drawing, but I was breathing, I was looking, I was imagining myself perched on something. I could feel the cold, I could feel the heat. I could look at other birds and the size that they were. It's the same kind of thing I do as a fiction writer. Only now I was doing it as I was sketching these birds. And it just took me into a place that I didn't know existed in my mind, this world of nature. And something happens, too, when you are feeling the bird and the life force, and then you're looking at a real bird. The first time that looked me directly in the eye and just stayed there, didn't take off, I felt that I had been acknowledged, not welcomed, but acknowledged as being part of the habitat. I'm part of that, and it's accepted, just as they were part of my world. We're still separate. We're still in separate worlds, but we're sort of occupying the same space. That was a thrilling experience. And then it was addictive. I got to do that every day.
Did you find nature journaling different from fiction writing?
Well, it was just fun, and it was just for me. As you said, it was like reading my diary or my journal, and it was a private journal. So I didn't have to think about...
Wait, fiction writing isn't fun for you?
As fiction writing is a torment. Oh, my God. But fiction writing is so deeply satisfying. You work through this agony in these pages, and you throw pages away, and you keep... you're muddled and something finally clears and you write something that is so true, perfectly true for you and how you see this. And you have a thrilling feeling, this, some people might call it an epiphany, but a connection to your higher self, whatever it is, it just makes you feel connected in a way. And it's the greatest high I could ever feel. So you want to keep doing it. I mean, if you feel that way and you discover something that's really important, then you want to keep doing it. Birds were fun. And birds, I discovered later that the things that I was discovering about them and writing about them was very similar to writing about fiction, because you get to this point where you see the pattern, you see what's unfolding, and you write it down, you write about it, and it's there. And I wanted it for memory. This is the way I remember things. I have to put it down.
Did your skills as a fiction writer, did it help you, as you say, feel the life within the birds?
Well, I'm very obsessive, and so I can stare at the same thing until I can get a sense of it. Even when writing fiction, you have to work through it over and over again before it becomes lifelike in a way. So it's the same thing with the birds. Not so much with the cartoon-like drawings that I did, but I would sit down and draw a detailed portrait of bird. And that to me was like writing fiction, because what you're doing is taking one pencil stroke after the other. I have that kind of patience. And if I didn't feel the bird would not come off as looking very lifelike, very as if it had been a bird that was at one time alive at least. So the birds had to look at me. I had to feel the liveliness of the bird. And then when I drew, I had to apply the same thing. So it's almost like a sense of the character that I do in a work of fiction, that I have to keep imbuing it with this life. And if I don't do that, it'll remain just a cardboard character.
Right, because when you look at your book, your birds, you want to stare in the eyes of the birds. I mean, you are drawn to the birds in your book.
I wouldn't call it a skill. It was a tendency of mine that I've always had with fiction, to just look at something and wonder over and over again, what is this? I think I was an observant child from a very early age because, well, I grew up in a bilingual home, and then I had a mother who was very easily distraught, suicidal, and I was always observing little signs of when things were going off the rails. If she was getting upset, and noticing little things about her, the way she was put together. Did she have lipstick on? Was her hair a mess? Did she have a nice dress on? These were all little clues as to what was going to happen. And the same thing in the yard with the birds. I look at them and I see little clues of something happening. Another bird looking at this bird, coming closer, or a little bird waiting on the side, watching this other bird eating the food that it wants. What's it going to do? And then watching the little bird jump at the back of the bigger bird, the bigger bird taking off, the little bird taking the food and taking off. All these things that I never noticed before. And when you start noticing it, the little details make your world larger. Now I have a theater in front of me, not just the mess, the mess of the yard.
So I have one little bird story of my own during the pandemic. So this was probably the end of 2020, right? We're all forced to work at home. This is pre-vaccine. And I have a little home office, and it looks out onto my deck. And I remember one day a little bird landed on the railing, and I had never seen a bird like this before. And I think our eyes locked.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of bird it was, but it was tiny, and maybe it had yellow feathers. I was like, maybe it's a hummingbird, but I don't know. It was just a tiny little bird that I'd never seen in my life. And then I was like, I want it to come back. So then I went to Home Depot. I bought bird seeds. I bought a bird feeder. But I think it came back one other time. But I was a really bad bird mom. I didn't clean any of the trays. The squirrels got into the bird feeder. The bird seed got moldy. And then I gave up. It lasted I was done. By the wintertime I was done. I threw everything out. And then after reading what you've done, I guess I'm a little concerned. It's like, oh, if I go down this road, will I become obsessive? Will I one day make my own bird feeders and buy mealworms and stick them in the freezer? But
well, winter is a very good time to just sprinkle seed out, because birds, they have a hard time finding food when it's under snow and ice.
Oh.
So that's a good time to put something out, and
All right.
they will be very happy.
All right, maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
And okay. All right.
Don't get too fancy. Just, you want to get a feeder that the squirrels can't get into.
Okay.
If you want to start off with birding light, get a bunch of shallow pans. I used the terracotta saucers that you have for
Planters.
planters.
Yeah.
And you fill that for about an inch and a half. Put a rock in it so the birds know that it's not deep. And then clean it every day. Empty it out, put fresh water. If it's starting to get any algae, you have to scrub it off. I put in hydrogen peroxide, leave it there for a few minutes. and then rinse it out. It degrades to water. It's not harmful to the birds. So that's it. Water. And if you have moving water, that's even better. They love moving water. We have a rain chain, and the water flows down the rain chain, and that's where the birds like to go.
More of my conversation with Amy Tan after this short break.
At Eastern Bank, we believe in good business. That's why we provide clients with a suite of products and services made to take their businesses to the next level. From express business loans to seamless cash management solutions, we make it easy to grow when the time is right. As a trusted full-service bank and the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running, we understand what you need to keep your business thriving. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
In a divided world, the one thing everyone seems to agree on is that the media is some kind of conspiracy.
And here's the thing, media is a conspiracy, just not the one everyone thinks it is.
I'm Naima Raza.
I'm Ben Smith.
And this is Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media. Every Friday between now and November, we're going to pull back the curtain on the stories everyone is talking about.
Exploring how money, politics, culture, and access shape everything you read, watch, and listen to.
Mixed Signals, a look inside modern media from people inside the machine.
Listen on Spotify.
So a lot of your fiction is based on your family and your family story, especially your mother, and who died in 1999. And you two were really close, and she's been described as your muse. Most of your books have focused on mother-daughter relationships and Chinese culture. Do you think your mom is present in every one of your works, including this one?
I do, yes. She's always around, actually. And in my mind, I have this feeling, especially in times of great joy and in times of when there's bad times, I really sense her around. I sense what she might say. She's not as volatile as she was in life, but now she's there more protectively. But when I was growing up, I didn't learn about birds as much because I think there's a vocabulary connection there. To my mother, there would be birds. That's a bird, that's a bird, that's a bird. Just bird, like trees, flowers. But so there wasn't the specific vocabulary for any of those things. And I think learning the names, like I didn't even know the names of most birds when I started. But I think that it's a discovery she would have really enjoyed. Because my mother, a very important thing for her was to feel as deeply as she could. Usually that meant anger and sorrow and grief and not necessarily, other things. But that is what I get also in watching the birds. It enables me to feel deeply about nature, about survival, about who we are as living beings in the same world, feeling more deeply about global warming, and about homelessness, about, poverty. And you're just looking at birds and the different ways they need to survive and eat and be housed, be protected. And so all of that comes into it as well. It's not just birds. It's not just about the birds.
In your memoir, Where the Past Begins, you write about how much trauma your mother experienced and how that manifested in your own childhood. And, your mom could be erratic, frightening, suicidal when she got upset. And it wasn't apparent when I read your first book, The Joy Luck Club, but it's clear to me now that your fiction writing and your writing, it's a form of healing for you. And so how did writing stories help you understand yourself and heal?
I think all of writing it's self-revelatory, meaning I am discovering something new about what I mean by common notions, love, betrayal, trust. What does joy consist of? Peace, calm. all of those notions that we just have static words for, and then you find the fullness of what they mean through a story. It's the only way that I can find it, and almost need for it to be a fictional story to get rid of all the defenses I have or the pre-assumptions that I've had about what those things mean. Just like when watching a bird, you just get rid of that and you have to enter into it afresh. I wouldn't say that all of it is healing. It's better understanding, meaning I still might have the pain. And I think that's good. It's necessary for a fiction writer. If you didn't have conflict, if you didn't have things that were disturbing, then it's going to be harder to find a compelling story. For me, that tends to be true. And my stories tend to be personal. They're not autobiographical as many people might think, but I will take something, some question, and I put it into the story, and it becomes a discovery. A lot of the times when I was writing the memoir, the last one, which I didn't call a memoir, these things kind of shape themselves differently by the time I get to the end. There were times that I would finish a chapter and I would be shaking and I would be very upset because I had realized something that was not healing at all, but it made sense. And it feeds into that larger understanding, which is important to me. But I think it is a mistaken notion people have that you can write something, you get it out, and your tears are streaming as you get to the end. You finally figured it out. You're going to be happy from now on. Mother wasn't an ogre. You can continue. No. There's a lot of facets of things. It surprised me, as a matter of fact, because my father was my hero, and he died when I was 15, as did my brother. And I idealized him, I realized. But then when I was writing this last book, Where the Past Begins, I had a different take on it. I followed these clues through diaries he had, sermons, and I had a completely different view of and I was so upset. I realized I was never his favorite. My older brother had been, and that he was disappointed in me. And his last letter that he wrote before he died was about his disappointment in me. And it was crushing. So that wasn't healing.
Yeah, I see.
That was crushing. But then I started looking at the whole of our life and our time together and our whole family together as a unit. And it made sense for a lot of other reasons. So it was a wider recognition of what had happened in my life.
But your mother, too, what I felt like in the last book, I mean, you had a better understanding where she came from, where your grandmother came from.
Oh, yes.
And a whole new perspective, right?
Yes. I would say the relationship was healed. And I think for her, she had a lot of healing that happened because she had felt nobody really understood what she'd gone through. Yeah. And so here I'd written about an abusive husband or about her mother who was a concubine who killed herself, who overdosed on opium, that it was intentional or maybe it was accidental, who knows. And my mother felt like there were a lot of people who had witnessed what had happened to her. So that for her was gratifying. She said nobody knew what we carried on our back, and now they know. She had a brother who said it was terrible that I was talking about these things in the past and I should just let it go. And my mother said, no, I suffered. My mother suffered. And she said, she can tell the world, she can tell everybody, you know.
Wow.
And that was what she wanted. And I wouldn't have known it except I wrote this book. She knew what was fiction too, and that she was upset that people didn't give me more credit for it being fiction. There were parts that were taken from her life, like mostly the ones about her mother and the abusive husband. Those were the two themes. But, I wasn't a chess prodigy. I don't know how to play chess, and we didn't live in that Chinatown. And I could go through the whole book and say, did that happen? No. Did that happen? No. And my mother knew, but in that book, however, were the emotions and the conflicts that were part of our life. They were cast into something called fiction, and my mother could recognize what it was.
Mm-hmm. So your high school art teacher, the one that gave you feedback about how you lack imagination, right? She lacks imagination. And I'm just trying to think, saying that to a young Amy Tan, who's, one of the great fiction writers of our generation, what would have happened if you got more support as a younger kid? Like, what would have happened to you? What would have been different?
I can never answer hypotheticals because it's like turning the world back and then winding it forward, and something else could have been an obstruction. So I don't usually go back and think about what could have been. Obviously, if somebody had said, you're a great artist, I might have followed that. Then I wouldn't have become a fiction writer, right? I might have followed that, and maybe I wouldn't have been successful. Being able to draw now, it's a surprise because at a certain age, I started to draw. Now I draw pretty decent birds. Would that make a living for me if that's all I did? If I was, Betty Tan, would I make a living off those birds? No, probably not. So the hypothetical makes me go in all the different directions. I could never say with any certainty that it would have been better or worse.
So when the Joy Luck Club first came out, I was probably 18 or 19 years old. I'm 51 now.
Oh, and you don't look 51. I was going to say.
I'm Asian, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We never look our ages.
Yes, but wait until you're 60 and then boom, all the wrinkles come out. And yeah.
So I just remember that was a really powerful moment for me to have your book come out. It was the first time I felt seen because all those, we played Mahjong, or my mom and my dad and their friends, they played Mahjong. I played Mahjong with my grandmother when I visit her in Hong Kong. So I felt seen for the first time. And then I remember seeing the movies, going to the theater and seeing the movie,
Yeah.
And so it was just this really big moment. And you were a true trailblazer on this front. And now, there are a lot of us now, many Asian American writers and creatives. And
getting the prizes, top literary prizes, which is really a huge breakthrough from what was happening when I first got published.
Right. And now this bird book, is this your first book that's not about Chinese culture? Is this the first one?
I never think of my books as being about Chinese culture. It's just about the life, about what I think about and what I know. And I happen to have this family I grew up in. That happens to be the culture I grew up in. But it's also American culture. Yeah. So it's not in my mind when people, kind of talk about my stories and they'll say it's about mother-daughter relationships or immigrants or about Chinese culture versus American. I've never thought of my writing that way when I'm doing the writing. I'm just simply writing a story. And like everybody, you take details, images that reflect what you've gone through in your past. Mm-hmm. So the birds are not Chinese. I don't have any Eurasian eagle owls in my yard. But as I'm doing this, I'm not thinking to myself, this is not about Chinese culture. This is not about mothers and daughters. It's just its own thing.
But all these years, when you first came out, did you think of yourself as an Asian American author or just a writer?
Both, in a way. I think the Asian American umbrella term reflects often the things that I do collectively with groups of Asians. So the Asians could have, be Asians of many races. It could be Japanese, Korean, Thai, Cambodian, Filipino. It could be, Samoan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm specifically, my race is Chinese. So I have to make these distinctions. Who am I in terms of a writer? I'm an American writer. And I always like to stress that point because in the beginning, they did put me in a section called ethnic writing or Asian American writing, as if don't quite belong. You're not part of the overall canon of literature. You're always going to be segregated. And I think it's very important, just like when we talk about people who come from other countries, who have their citizenship or they were born in this country, but their race may be different. Parents are from a different country. They're still Americans. Mm-hmm. And so to keep referring to somebody as she is Chinese American or he is Lebanese American, I think it creates a barrier of some kind. But I definitely would say I am Chinese in my race. I'm Chinese American in my cultural upbringing, meaning I have this mix, this very messy mix of Chinese and American. And then when I work on community activities, I'm Asian American.
Right. I mean, in crafting this question, I'm thinking about how would I answer that myself, And, I write a business column for the Boston Globe. So, of course, I think of myself as a writer first, and I happen to focus on gender and diversity issues in the workplace. But because I have this platform, I feel a certain responsibility, to write about Asian American issues. And I happen to really enjoy that, and I get a big response from people.
I think that's very true. If I were to write nonfiction, if I were to write essays on a topic that has to do with a political system or countries or relationships, definitely culture would come into it. And my perspective as somebody who's Chinese American would come into it. But if I'm thinking that when I'm writing a story and deliberately honing that as part of the focus, I don't think I would be writing something that is authentic or genuine in a way that I'd always be saying, oh, is that politically the right thing to say? Is that I can hear this person say, you should never have negative male characters in here. That does not do anything for our community. If I'm thinking of this constantly, I'm not going to write fiction. I'm going to write propagandistic role models. And you have to write what is emotionally true. So for me, it is a lot about emotional truth. I cannot divvy it into what is current to talk about, the current view of how we look at things.
So it seems like you still feel very connected to your mom, even though she's long gone. So what would she think of your bird project and where you are now since your first, since first publishing the Joy Luck Club?
I think she would be very happy that I'm finding a lot of peace within myself, that I can go into a place that's beautiful and peaceful, because she had a hard time finding peace. And that it's not a sad place, it's a place of beauty. She could have really appreciated something like that. And we're not a family that went on vacation anywhere. They worked, both of them, 7 days a week they were working. And the only vacations we had were to go to Disneyland both times, when I was 6 and when I was 12. Those were the only vacations. So for her to have been able to enjoy being in outdoors, I think she would have loved it. She would have She was obsessive. I think she could have really gotten into it.
Like you, right?
Yes, I've got her obsessive
like daughter, like
personality.
mother.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Amy, this has been an incredible moment for me. I feel like I've been waiting all my life to meet you after first reading the Joy Luck Club. So Amy Tan is a best-selling author, a personal hero of mine. She has a new book called The Backyard Bird Chronicles. I hope everyone buys it and gets into birding.
Thank you.
Was it nerd
Thank
out
you.
on birding? Or I don't know, what's
Nerd
the
out,
phrase?
Yes, I don't know what the phrase is. Just love birds, save birds. That's my message. If you love birds, you'll want to save them.
All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer with help from Alexis Sargent and Scott Hellman. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.